Sahana Bhavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let's play a game. And the game starts with a question. Would you stake, suppose you have prepared for a speech, and the speech will be given to an audience of maybe 100 people, and it's a 5-minute speech, not too long. Would you save or would you stake your entire house on that speech going exactly as you rehearsed it 100 times when you stand in front of the podium and give that speech? Your entire house. So one word is out, your house is gone. No. Why? I mean, you've rehearsed it 100 times. This is plenty of time. It's only 5 minutes. What about 2 minutes? Entire house, one word out. Okay. Interesting. Take notes down. Good data. Okay. Would you suppose you're working 2 years sincerely, hard, for 2 years, and you would stake your entire life savings betting that working for 2 years hard, you will get a promotion. That means if you don't get a promotion, you sincerely work hard, then all your life savings, all your bank accounts are emptied out. How about that? Right, this data, very good data. Okay. Would you, or are you willing to stake your entire day going exactly as you expected, considering there are so many variables that could turn otherwise? Would you? Your entire day is staked on one simple fact, that everything is going to go exactly as I have planned out. Now take that day and stretch it along 365, 1 year. Would you stake your God-given life, precious life, on the fact that your 1 year is going to turn out exactly as you had envisioned, anticipated? Now take that 365 days, times that by 80 on average. Would you stake your entire blessed life on it going exactly as you had imagined or anticipated? You're given a one life, precious life, and you're assigned this life, say 80 or 90 years. And you say, I'm going to take this life, which consists of 365 days, which consists of days, which consists of hours, and I'm going to guarantee that I'm just going to live it by putting countless variables of my life turning out exactly as I had anticipated. Does that sound reasonable? Does that sound something that an intelligent person would do? No. Therefore, chapter 4, verse 21, Krishna calls this freedom from expectation. However, I will rename this to freedom from disappointment. So if you ever want to write a book, and the book is titled Freedom from Disappointment or Freedom from Suffering, then when the person, the reader, opens up the book, what they are really looking at is freedom from expectation. The expectation that despite countless variables changing or diluting the outcomes, that your life is contingent on those variables, those outcomes, turning out as you want. And therefore, we're now all authors, okay? You and I are authors of a book. So we have 39 or whatever authors collectively, okay? We're all going to, so it's going to have by Pankaj, by Ricky, by Leo, by Andre, by Arkiri, by Michael, okay? Like that, by Andre and so on. And the reader opens up this book. The title is Freedom from Disappointment. This is our title, Freedom from Disappointment. Freedom from pain, freedom from suffering. And chapter 1, the most important, is the art of acknowledging what is, suppose. The art of acknowledging life, the art of acknowledging the obvious. And what is that obvious? What's the first page? What would you say on the first page? The art of acknowledging the obvious. The most important message. What would you say on the first sentence? Because you have to hook the reader. Remember, it's freedom from disappointment, which is really freedom from expectations. So how would you hook the reader? The first sentence that will set the tone for the rest of the book. What would you say? It's an improvised question, hard to answer, but I think we can try. What comes to your mind?
That life isn't here to make you happy.
Love it. I'm reading this book 100%. Life isn't here to make you happy. Michael.
I think it's the same thing. I was trying to say that the world doesn't owe you anything.
I love it. Wow. The world doesn't owe you anything. If any other ideas pop up, feel free to put your hand up or speak. I really want to read this book. Alison?
Following on, life isn't here to make you happy, and it doesn't matter.
Okay. It doesn't matter. It's a big hit to, one's pride. Like, oh, everything matters. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. In the big picture, I love it. In the big picture, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Meenakshi? Hi.
Hi, I'm new here, and I would just go very simple with what have you expected when you were 5? What did you expect when you were 10? What are your expectations now?
Exactly. And that would really put some perspective how the expectations themselves have continued to change. Gagan.
I'm thinking, how are you going to screw up your life? You're going to, or more like, you are going to screw up your life, and this is how you're going to screw up.
You think you got it all sorted out?
Comma, think again.
Yeah.
I love it. Pankaj?
Get more than what you have imagined.
You and your thoughts don't really matter.
These are all good hooks. So, verse 21, this is what Krishna says, the very statement that we all just rightfully said so. And he says, by acknowledging this is how you gain mental composure. It's simple as that. Just acknowledging something that you already knew all along. The person was just afraid to admit it or just didn't have time to acknowledge it. Just acknowledging that life is not here to make me happy. I have to navigate myself through this, puzzle of complexity. I've got to figure it out and on my own, end of the day. And so by acknowledging this, acknowledging that nobody owns you anything really. In fact, you're getting more than you could ever ask for. The universe is amazingly generous. You're getting free air. You're getting free sunlight. You're getting free food. No matter what's happening in the world, you're still looking on the phone, on that news, because you're breathing clean air, right? Or you have a bed and a roof. So the most essentials you have already. And what happens through time is we tend to forget this. We take it for granted. We want more. And this is human nature. So you cannot really blame yourself. So once in a while, when you just have a conversation with yourself and you look around your house, you look around your life, and you start to reappreciate what you have, that alone reduces this disease of called stubbornness or lack of gratitude or gloominess or complaining, or you're just not being happy with all of the wonderful things that you've been given already right now. So really, this is, see, that wisdom is not that deep. It's just very simple. It's just really appreciating what you have right now. You may not have a lot, but you still have something. So the question is not, I want more. It's rather, how can I do the best with what I've already been given? That's the real question. What do I do and how do I make the best with the resources that I've already been blessed right now? So it's never too late. It's only too late once the person really is in the hospital and they're on life support. Until then, you are blessed another one more day to figure things out for yourself. So this is the good news. So we have to remember this, because life takes over and then we start to look at all things that are not working. Look at that. This is not working, that is not working. But actually, just for you to even recognize that requires a mind that is working. So, right, let's use that mind to come out of this sense of expectations that life is supposed to give me and make me happy. No, life is supposed to accommodate 8 billion needs in this world. And it's not easy to build a world that accommodates 8 billion people's needs, where your need is totally different from my need. And yet the world is somehow designed to still little bit provide my needs, little bit provide your needs, and somehow it works. That is not easy. So we no longer live in the world where the population is 100 million. And if you really think about it, the wisdom given by our rishis, suppose 5,000 years ago, if you think about it, today it's so much more complex because so much more options are available than, let's say, 3,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago, life was very simple. Right? You didn't have media, you didn't have options, you didn't have a sort of just endless amount of opportunities to sidetrack yourself. So today, if you think about it, your time of figuring it out is a lot tougher than it ever was before. On the mere fact of being given so many options and having to swim through all of these options and figure it out. So sometimes, see, when we read these books of wisdom, okay, and the rishis are describing this, the remain equanimous, non-attachment, completely kind of stoic mentality. And you say, wow, this is amazing. Well, think about going back into that time. Suppose there's a time traveling device, okay, and we all walk through it now, and you find yourself at that time. You'll be amazed how simpler life was. You're like, there's nothing much to compare. There's no competition, right? There's no new ideas that are just sort of diluting everything. It's very simple. So what I'm saying is, we even sometimes expect to live this vision according to the rishis, to be a completely perfected, stoic person who never gets distracted, who's completely emotionally composed. And yet you have to remember, you live in a very complex world today than it ever was before. So that is something to be grateful to. I am surviving. In fact, I would love, you know what I would love? To bring one of those rishis, with all due respect, to bring him to the modern world. Now, let me hear you say about and speak about these glories and, how everything's so beautiful and, there's no, it's all peaceful. Okay, please just look around, load up the news and see what's happening in the last 3,000 years. And I want to see your composure today. It wouldn't be easy, I tell you. It wouldn't be easy. So that is, again, something to be grateful for. You are surviving and you're doing very good so far, okay? So this is the art of expectation, dropping these high standards that a person has established for themselves that makes it impossible to enjoy peace, because there's always a silent comparison to something higher. Well, how about just recognizing that what I've got and working with what I've got? That's all. That it's simple as that. So Otherwise, you're setting up a no-win situation. The second way to gain mental composure is converting what's called ownership, that this is mine, that I am supposed to, this I own, into what's called trusteeship. Trusteeship means, did you ever have a time, before I answer, where the person might get very good in something, and what happens is they start to lose that grace or that sense of gentleness or that sense of gratitude? One becomes extremely, almost overconfident in oneself. The reason why this happens is that as time goes by, you start to see that this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. And so one starts to hold on very much onto the very few things that they have, and becomes sort of this, a very heavy impression upon yourself, like this is mine. But the truth is, what is yours? What is yours here? Please tell me. Anything? I'm really curious. What is mine? What is yours? It's like no answer comes out. Like if I search deep, I can't find anything that's mine. Even the thought, 5 minutes from now, if it was really mine, I would know exactly what that thought is. Pankaj.
My deeds and my intentions are mine. They will, and whatever I do in this birth, it will carry with me in next rebirth and cycles of rebirth.
Good.
So what I do and what I train myself, that I carry with me.
Yes. So this is one way to look at it. So yes, this is responsible, a practical way to look at it. My actions, my choices are mine. So see, you can answer it a second way. The second standpoint, you can say, actually, that is not mine either. Okay, because it is actually Ishwara's. Because if it was really mine, I didn't create the concept of deed. I didn't create the concept of action. I didn't create the concept of decision. I just come into this world and a decision takes place. And then I say, I made a decision. But what created the concept of decision, A versus B? I didn't. So you just sort of come and you get loaded with a choice. And then you're sort of forced to say, I want that versus that. And then you say, that's my decision. So ultimately, if you didn't create the very instrument that chooses A versus B, then you cannot really own the action either, because the action is contingent on the instrument that makes the decision. That means you didn't cobble up the instrument called the intellect that chooses A versus B. You didn't cobble up or cook up in a lab, some magical lab in the cosmic space, and you said, I'm going to cook up the capacity for remembering, cooking up capacity for emoting, cooking up capacity for thinking or calculating, and I'm going to now put it together and then going to now plant it in my brain, okay? You didn't do that. You just showed up and you're given this ability. However, what Pankaj is saying is, despite being given this ability, practically, yes, the choices that we make are mine. And that's a very good way to look at it also. So converting, Sharmila, no, converting this ownership, this idea that everything is mine and it is not yours, right? My knowledge, my fame, my success, my happiness, my money, it can be very heavy on one's life eventually, because it's not natural to start to own so many things that are not yours. If they were really yours, then when you die, when your body dies, it would all be going together with you. That means the money, the knowledge, all of that will be going along with you. But we know this is not true, because when there is a rebirth, all of that knowledge that I claimed as mine, where is it in the next lifetime? It's not there. So it was never mine to begin with. Sharmili.
Hi, Andre. Just going back to your point about how life is so much harder now and
how we have so many choices and complexity compared to, when this knowledge or this wisdom was originally shared or written or given by the rishis. So are there any like more modern teachers or wisdom or books or something like that that kind of talk more about the complexities of what we're all facing today and how to navigate that, keeping this wisdom in mind? Like, is the wisdom still relevant, applicable?
That's a brilliant question. Reason is because if you look at the tribes who are no longer existent today, like look at the Egyptian, the Mayans, the Incas, and so on, or even the Native American wisdom, you have to ask, why is it no longer as prominent today as it once was? Because it was a huge, culture. And the reason is because while it's important to retain the tradition, you also have to account the modern changes and the language and the times that humanity is going through. So like that, Vedanta is no exception. If we just stick to the traditional principles, and I just keep on repeating to you, for example, Karma Yoga is doing things without expecting anything in return, doing things without expecting anything in return. If I just say that without explaining and bringing it to modern context, then not only will you get bored, because you've heard it before from everyone else, you will also ask yourself, look, it doesn't really apply to me, because how can a mother, to just give birth and not expect anything in return from her child? So you start to ask this, or, how can I just go to work and not expect anything in return? The only reason I go to work is because I expect to get paid. So the teacher has to recognize these nuances of modern life and mention them to the student for the teaching to have any relevance in the first place. Now, what I have observed is that, in fact, I don't think it's polite to talk about others because I cannot speak on what they do. I certainly can say that I'm very much aware of what you're saying. And for that reason, I always entwine the wisdom in the modern context, so that I'm speaking to you, the modern man or woman, rather than the ones who have lived 3,000 years ago, where basically life is very simple. You go out, vanaprastha, in the, near the forest or sort of in a community, and you learn the wisdom. But today you cannot really think like that. For example, if you have sannyasi, sannyasi also has to change. Because if I just say to you sannyasi, then what do you think according to the scriptural wisdom? You literally think, okay, so I'll just put on a certain kind of clothing. It doesn't have to be ochre. It can be any color, but the idea is just to relinquish my bank account, relinquish everything, and just live or go away somewhere and let people support me. But look at this, so that, right, I can concentrate on the wisdom. But look at this. Today, you don't have to do that at all. Today, you have cheap rent or shared rent. You have your own room. You have transportation. You've got people who really don't bother you, unless you don't say anything. You really have it quite simple. You don't have to go away anywhere today. The space for studies in the library is available, in the car is available. So now if I start to say to you, go and you need to sannyasi, you have to take and just leave it all. You just have to leave it all. What is your modern mind going to think? It's going it's going to be in conflict to what I'm saying. You're probably going to be saying, Andre, you probably don't have enough experience to be saying that. So the teacher has to recognize the experience of a modern aged man or woman and then speak in the light of that while still preserving the original teachings. This is the art of continuing a tradition which is going through an ever-evolving time. So in the perfect world, Sharmili, every teacher would recognize this and put a lot of attention in speaking to the grihasta, to different ages, to different groups. But in my observation, I'm not going to mention names, that is very rare. That is more rare than it's common, in my observation.
Yeah, I fully agree. And, very much appreciate you bringing it to real life and practical and, more relevant to what we all face today. So very appreciative of you and your teaching style. Just out of curiosity, any books or authors you recommend at this point?
I can only say how personally I approach it. There is a website called Blinkist, and Blinkist is really book summaries. I don't have time to read whole books nowadays, but I would just take those audio services that summarize and take the crux out of a book, all the best kind of practical, doable techniques. And I'll just listen for 20 minutes walking in the forest or something, take notes down. And this is the way that I will just feed my mind. This is my way. Your way could be your way. I don't know how it is, but my point is find a way to continue feeding some food, some positive, healthy food in your mind, because the mind will revert back to its old ways. This is just the nature of the mind. So this has to be an active process. And of course, now I have to bring again a modern context. Can you do this every day in line with your work? Probably not. But can you find a time to help yourself throughout the week? Most likely, yes, also. If you can find a time to browse Facebook for 1 hour, I guarantee you can find to browse some good stuff for 20 minutes. So it takes deliberate effort in the start.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Now, verse 22, that was revision of verse 21, chapter 4. Verse 22, he now says, freedom from jealousy. So what else is it mean to master one's mind? Because he says, the person who is free of expectations, comma, that one, his or her body, mind, and senses have been mastered. For now, you can just say his or her mind has been mastered. So now, if I ask the question, how do you master your mind? What is mind mastery or relative mastery? Don't think now absolute mastery. Relative mastery, according to verse 21, we just said 2 things. Number 1, get a checkup on your expectations. And number 2, converting ownership. This is mine, and it has to thus work out in the exact way that I wanted to into trusteeship. Remember that you are blessed this instrument, blessed this knowledge, blessed your life for a short amount of time. Therefore, use it wisely. You have a responsibility to use it to the best of your abilities whenever you can, of course. So these 2 are verse 21. Now, verse 22, how else do you master your mind? He says, through freedom from jealousy. However, I will rewrite this statement and say, what does it mean to say jealousy? It is more like freedom from the insecurity from someone taking something away from you that is near and dear. That's what jealousy really is. I have an insecurity about something that I cherish closely to me, and I fear it of being taken away from me. That is another way of stating, because I know we all heard jealousy before. What is jealousy? So you have to describe it. So, and Krishna gives a hint how to solve this. He says, one who is happy with whatever comes by chance, he or she is unaffected by opposites. Okay, so what does it mean? It means to first acknowledge that 2 things. This world doesn't work according to some random cycle. It works according to a predictable cause-effect relationship. So if I bring some person that I care about to a party, that's a cause, that was an action. And that person fancies someone that I kind of notice. That is not a random thing. They just innocently fancy and want to talk to somebody else. I cannot now make a story unless I choose to about it. That's just what happened. It's a cause-effect relationship. There's no evilness. No one's trying to hurt you. You brought a person to the party. The person started to talk to somebody else. They connected. If I have a certain insecurity about where that might lead to, then that is certainly some space for me to look at my own narratives. What might I be telling myself that's causing this fear of losing them to some other person? Am I not good enough to keep them? Am I so, if I was really interesting, and if I was really, a man or woman of a certain, composure or a certain quality, then what is there to fear? So that's one way to look at it. Isn't this true? If you are really self-assured in yourself, even if someone were to leave you, hey, you know yourself to be of very good taste, then what is there to lose out? In fact, all I can think of, whoa, they didn't appreciate my taste. That is a loss on their side, because my taste is very well thought through. So the first, whenever there is insecurity of losing something that is near and dear to you, then firstly acknowledge, step one, acknowledge the world works according to a cause and effect relationship. You cannot stop this. And if something that is near and dear to you happens to be at a potential distancing away from yourself, then you have to certainly confront that reality and do something about it. But to try to stop it, then you're sort of kind of adding unnecessary burdens onto yourself, because the other object or whatever it is, the person has their own needs, has their own kind of, tastes, and you have to be strong enough to acknowledge that. That is a possibility. The second is that Krishna mentions the word opposites. Now, when he says opposites, that means the world consists of opposites, and jealousy is one of those opposites. In fact, we don't have to speak about peace and joy, do we? Nobody has to talk about that. It's like, great, I want more of that stuff. So when we say opposites, you don't need to speak about peace and joy. You mention those things that are unpleasant. And one of them is losing something that is dear to me. Then what might you replace that opposite with, such as jealousy? The whole Gita has answered this question so far. You might replace it with prayer. How about me praying and saying, Lord, this jealousy I acknowledge. It's in me. I feel insecure. I feel a sense of competition. I feel a sense of loss, because my identity, my sense of standing upright and healthy is contingent on something that I fear is going to be taken away from me. So therefore, it's telling you that your identity is in some way entwined with the presence or the absence of an object. Thus, recognizing that, I feel jealousy, because if it goes away, what happens to my identity? It starts to go away right along with it. That means it starts to fall down. So maybe I have another chance. I can say, Lord, I acknowledge this. Please help me to remove this insecurity that's maybe from the unconscious. Maybe I learned it when I was a little child, and it's stored in my, unconscious, and it's just there bubbling up now. Help me to remove this. You can also say an affirmation. You can acknowledge it and then use that jealousy as inspiration. I do feel a sense of loss. I do feel a sense of competition. I do feel a sense that they are, or he or she is better than me. Therefore, let me use that as inspiration to refine my own life, to refine my own skills, to refine my own language, maybe my face, maybe whatever it is. So how about using it as inspiration? This is wonderful. We're not even saying get rid of it. Just acknowledge it. It's there. Great. It's there. I have something to work on. That means once again, the responsibility goes back onto you. Isn't this a much better way to live? By using these indicators, such as insecurity, rather than falling for them and then going to a self loop of I'm not good enough, oh, why me? I will never be this person. I'm not meant to be. It's just a continuous loop. Rather say, cool. In fact, you're not going to say cool. You're probably going to, not like it, but say, okay, this is in me. All right. Let me look at a few things in my own mind and develop some maturity, some emotional maturity, some intellectual maturity. This is a great way to use jealousy or any of these opposites to help yourself. Okay, so in verse 23, which we're going to continue now, Krishna is going to ask a question. And he's going to say, how do you do exactly what you're doing now? So that's not a question of how, I know, Gagan. Without changing anything, doing the exact same actions as you're doing now in your life, what would you have to do or change or slightly refine so that your existing actions help you in your spiritual journey, help you to become smarter, more discerning, less mechanical, more deliberate, more mindful, without changing anything about your present actions. So we're not going to say now, stop doing this, start doing this. No, no, no. We're simply going to mention one small addition that you can add, it's an attitude, onto your actions that will greatly help you and turn every small action into a potential spiritual sadhana. Gagan?
A short clarification regarding the verse 22. Is jealousy the same as envy, or they're a little different?
So the word jealousy and envy have slight differences. And if I remember, one of them is 3 people, and envy is, I believe, 2 people. So envy, I remember in marketing, they used to say, make your friends green with envy. So what this means is that when I see someone who has something that I don't have, and I experience envy. Whereas jealousy involves a third person. It's when I fear the loss of something that is near and dear to me. For example, I take a girlfriend out to a party and some man starts to talk to her, and I feel that he is going to steal her. So I feel that insecurity, aka jealousy. So summary, jealousy is 3 people, and envy is only 2. It's between me and something else. So in verse 23, we're going to speak about the word action. Firstly, we're going to address what does the word action mean. And the word karma, or action, has 2 words, 2 definitions. The first is whenever there is a choice between 2 or more options, then it's an action. That's called karma. So usually hear the words karma, do karma, do action. So a machine spinning gears is not an action according to this definition. An action is when there's an instrument that can choose between this or that. Then it's a karma. So that's the first definition of the word karma. Action contingent on free will. The second definition of karma is actually karma pala. Karma pala. Pala means fruit. Pala is really just the consequences of that action. So when I choose A over B, then what follows? Follows a consequence. That consequence is called karma pala. Therefore, the word karma, it goes everywhere. It's your karma, karma, right? You have to just be able to distinguish these 2. Are you talking about an action, or are you talking about karma pala, aka a consequence? So for example, this is a karma, right? Drinking, karma. And now my thirst has been satiated. That's also called karma. But if thirst is satiated, it really means karma pala. That means that thirst satiating has been karma pala. Okay. Now, the next question is, what is thus a healthy karma? See how I can now use the word karma once, and now you have to discern which one I'm talking about. What does it mean to perform a healthy karma? Why is this important? Because what Krishna is going to mention is there are two ways of doing karma and action. There is an unhealthy way and there is a healthy way. An unhealthy way, before I explain it, I want you to listen and then you tell me whether it's healthy or unhealthy. Suppose I have to defend myself every time I'm criticized, because defending is a karma. Is that healthy or unhealthy? Unhealthy. Sometimes you can just laugh it off. Okay, that's your opinion. Good on you, right? Just smile. Oh, simple. I have to defend myself every time I'm criticized. Not really. But suppose you have to. We call that dislike towards criticism, an intense dislike towards criticism. And therefore, I have to defend myself. Okay. How about if you are upset with me, I have to know whether you're upset with me or not, otherwise I can't function. I have to. It's a common one, right? Something I suspect. And how about letting it go for once? Because that could be maybe a raga, that means an extreme like for validation. That means I have to get validation, otherwise I cannot move on. Okay. How about I have to win an argument? Healthy or unhealthy? Okay. I can hear you saying that. What about I have to experience peace 24/7? Yeah, big one, right?
That's my one.
That's the enlightenment problem, right?
Yeah.
When I get enlightened, peace 24/7. Sorry, but that's not knowledge speaking. That is your likes and dislikes speaking. Who doesn't want peace? Really? So, okay, how about I have to constantly achieve something to feel worthy? If I don't feel that sense of achievement, is that healthy or unhealthy? It is, of course, unhealthy. Okay. So what can you pick out that is common amongst all of these? I have to, I have to, I have to, I have to. Therefore, going back to the question, what is an unhealthy karma? It is when the pressure of pleasing the displeased you in the moment is greater than the well-being of the future you. Let me say that again. The pressure, that means there's a pressure to please the displeased me right now. Of course, it's a displeased. Otherwise, why would you pleasing the individual? Because the individual is displeased. So the individual is displeased, and there's a pressure to please the displeased individual, right? This is normal. Everyone has this pressure. Now, that pressure becomes so large that it overrides the considered well-being of the future you. That's called eating a big, cake, like, displeased I, craving like crazy, eat the whole thing, and right, cool. I've pleased the I in a moment, but what about the considered well-being of the future me? That gets overwritten. Now, I'm not pointing fingers because I know I'm talking to some individuals here, say, hey, I eat cake, I do this, I do that. I'm not, this is not about that. I have to bring examples. So I just want you to think now, just consider how might this, if you stack this up, affect your life in the future if I just have to constantly please the displeased I in the moment at the expense of fattening up or destroying the mind of the future me. How might this look like in 5 years if you just continue going like this? Okay, let me ask this. Do you want that displeased? Do you want that fattened up or non-sharp me, the mind that's lost all their capability because all it's doing now is just doing, crossword puzzles, which isn't really, that stimulating, or watching social media, which isn't that stimulating? Let's take that 5-year me, right, that has lost their skills, and let me give them to you now. Okay, please, would you like that me that's lost it all? Here. I'm not giving you something else. I'm giving you to you, except 5 years from now. Here, please have it. Hopefully you're shaking your head. No. Okay. So now that you, let's take care of them. That's all we're saying. So now to take care of them, what do I have to do right now? I have to change my attitude. I have to change my actions. I have to consider how might I be affecting that future me. Now, I know it's hard. It's not easy. This is the hardest thing to do because the human nature is to help yourself whenever there's pain in the moment. And it can be very strong pressure to ignore the future I. So, okay. Now, how can we find this example in the Gita? Well, look at Arjuna. He got weapons from Indra, the Indra in Swarga Loka. And what were those weapons? He got weapons because there was Dvesha towards the Kauravas. I'm going to, they had done so many things that are bad. Bhima, my brother, tried to be poisoned by Duryodhana. My wife, Draupadi, was tried to be disrobed by Dushasan. Duryodhana, is constantly taking took our Indraprastha away. He cheated in the game of dice. He tried to burn us alive in the wax house. So all of this hatred caused Arjuna to get his divine weapons from heaven. I'm not saying this is actual, true story, because you don't go to heaven and you fall down from heaven and here's the weapons. So it's a nice story. So now what happened at the battlefield? What did he say? Krishna, having gained all those weapons and lived in dislike or hate towards the Kauravas, now suddenly I have familial love. Before I was in Dvesha, dislike. Now I'm in Raga, a like. Now I cannot act because I have love towards family on the other side. Therefore, I can't fight. What was Krishna's job? Krishna's job was to say, my dear, I can hear what you're saying. You're acting from a certain pressure because you have a human mind. However, I need you to consider for a moment the big picture. And what's the big picture? That you are fighting to protect a kingdom that is currently being operated by a king who is psychologically unhealthy. Suppose you're running a kingdom. Would you want your king or your leader to be psychologically unhealthy? That's going to cause some issues, right? To everyone. So now Krishna says to Arjuna, you have to do what needs to be done because it is not about your likes and dislikes. This is your stuff. Everyone's got likes and dislikes. You need to realize, Mr. or Mrs. Arjuna, that this story that you are a character in has been running for eons. For a moment, time being, you are in this story called the Kurukshetra, which is even today, by the way. You are in the Kurukshetra right now. This is not a story that took 5,000 years back. You are in the story, the Mahabharata. You can call it not Bharata because Bharata is India. You're in the Maha Worldlata, okay, in the great worldly plan. You are in that scenario. And so he says, look, I know that you're operating from a certain pressure to not act because you have love for the family. But you have to ask yourself, is it really about me here? Because what's going to remain after this body goes? That which really matters. You're going to give a legacy. You're going to leave a legacy for those just like you to have the space to figure it out for themselves. In fact, you and I can only figure it out. Why? Because those before us have sacrificed so much for us to be here now, to enjoy internet, just to communicate. There are sea cables right now. Did you know that sea cables underneath the ocean, 5,000 kilometers, and there are a bunch of zeros and ones flowing through those cables, and you're now, communicating with me. Amazing. So what happens if you have this like and dislike? Well, let's look at the order. Suppose you have a strong like and dislike. What's next? It causes perspective loss. you lose your perspective. When you lose your perspective, what follows? You make the wrong decisions. Suppose, for instance, we have a politically motivated voter, and the voter doesn't like something about someone who is kind of mature. They don't like them because they believe in, they have some different idea, and I don't like the good guy. So then as a voter, I vote for another politician who may not be as mature in kind of holistic thinking. Now, what happens when you times that by an entire nation? You have a certain kind of leader, right, that rises. And what happens when that leader rises and makes certain choices? Now, everyone in the nation has to somehow undergo the consequences. What about a spiritual aspirant who is operating under this pressure? Another way to say it, binding like or dislike, or pressure to please the displeased I. What about that in a spiritual scenario? How might that act out? Well, it's very simple. I dislike the scriptures. I dislike the knowledge. What I really want is, I want an experience. I want to feel good. Therefore, spirituality for me becomes about feeling good, and I discard anything that contradicts my like. Will that ever help the person? It would take them to a certain point, but ultimately, who is stopping whom? Is the world stopping you, or your own likes and dislikes are stopping you? Yeah, your own pressure. That's called self-imposed limitations. So who really imposes limitations onto you? Is it the world, or is it yourself? Yeah. Now, there's no need to feel shame about this. It's just something to acknowledge. We're not saying change something, just acknowledge it. I am a human being, and I impose myself with certain rules, and then I stop myself from really just growing and maturing up. So this is another thing to watch out for. Then he says, how else do you bind yourself? How else do you impose your own limitations? Well, that's called, when things don't go my way, then I feel like a victim. Because I feel like a victim, I find enemies to blame in this world. It's their fault that I'm in this place, that I'm not getting what I want. And then the person loses perspective about the right way to act. They create false stories. And when you create false stories, you distance yourself from Ishwara's order, and you forget the right way to act. That means once teaching the wisdom, thinking the wisdom, learning the wisdom in one instant, because of the stories that I've created, because I want something and I didn't get it, and I created enemies. It's the world, it's you, it's not me, it's you. It was your fault. And thus I forget the right way to act. But on the outside, I show a composed character. That's called a split personality. On the outside, composed, professional, great image, but on the inside, I'm blaming the world just like everyone else. This is very dangerous. So let's then ask, how do you ruin your life? This is a formula for ruining your life. Okay, let's find out. I kind of gave it away already. How to ruin one's life slowly, not overnight. It happens very slowly. What would you have to do, according to what I just said, to ruin your life? Please tell me. Teach me how to ruin my life.
Raga Dvesha.
Okay, so Asha said Raga Dvesha. So what about it? Because like for helping out, that's a like. It's not destructive. But then how can a like and dislike, a binding like and dislike, then destroy my life? If not all likes and dislikes are destructive. What makes a like or dislike destructive?
I set unrealistic expectations.
Okay, okay. That's what Asha wanted to say, I guess. Unrealistic. That means putting too much pressure. I have to, or else, right? So that means, ignoring all the other options. So every time we act from this like or dislike, what are we doing? I'm narrowing down my vision, and only this much is possible. All else around gets ignored. So every single time you act from this, I have to win an argument, or else, I have to do this, or else. Every time you do that, it really just narrows down your choice of options. And this is how, in the older age, one becomes very, what we call stubborn. That means I'm not willing to think outside what I've thought for hundreds, thousands of times. Now, let me put this into, according to the verse, what Krishna is saying here, because we have to ask for a solution, some solution, is that the way that it starts is that you have this importance right now. I need to please this I, and it's very tempting to do that, right? There's a displeased me who, needs some connection, who needs some whatever, some love, some relationship. And if you don't have a checkup, a regular checkup as to why do I even need this? What will this do for me? Is this a real thing, or is it just something that I'm imposing? Is this a value attribution? Am I just giving it more importance than it really even has? If you don't ask these questions, then it becomes extremely real for you. So the way to interrupt this pattern is just simply ask, why? Okay, great. I have a real attraction for this, but why? Okay, suppose this is brilliant. Suppose I have it right now. Okay, cool. Now what? Okay, it's in my life. Now what? Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going through this. Yep, there's great stuff. Okay, now what? Okay, yep, we're in a relationship. Okay, now what? Okay. So it's just a real, mental exercise to put yourself in that moment, and you realize, okay, it's good, but it's not that, exuberant as I thought. So you kind of balance out that whole fantasy mode that takes the mind over. Very simple. Okay, I have it now. Now what? Brilliant technique to put you back into perspective. So write down in your sheet or in your mind, now what? Question mark. I got it. Now what? Okay. So we answered the question, how to lose perspective. So basically, by the repetition of what I want to do, it becomes so important. I neglect the well-being of the future me. That's the first one. That means all that matters is the present me right now. The second is when you expect certain things to take place for you to be okay. For example, have you ever given, I know Shamili, have you ever given advice to someone and you came from experience, right? You've been through this hundreds of times. You know exactly what's going to happen. And you sincerely share this advice and they don't listen to you and they still do their own thing. It's annoying, isn't it, when this happens? You're like, oh man. You also, there's like this tendency to take it personally sometimes. So now suppose that you don't feel good. So what really happened was my joy, what I really did was my advice was contingent on them taking it. That means I've given my power away to someone else following my advice that came from many years of experience. Is this a safe way to live? Because that person may not understand you. They're in a different stage of life. They're in a completely different world altogether. It's like a different world. Therefore, even someone who keeps on giving good advice, and I've seen this happen several times, who keeps on giving good advice, and you keep on being this good, generous, giving person, and you really like to help, there's a certain time that I've seen in the older age where the person just sort of something clicks and they say, I've been giving so much. I've been a good person. I've been following the words. I've been following the Gita, just serve because it is a practice for me. And I've really just only gotten 1% in return. It would really be wonderful if I've gotten 5% because I really need help. I need some once in a while acknowledgement or, some feedback or, a little bit of help. And I've seen what happens to such a person who forgets that the world doesn't function like this. They turn bitter. After a lifetime of being generous and kind and loving, within months, they turn bitter. Totally different personality, different vibe, different everything. And you're like, how is this even possible? It's possible. So therefore, what I want to say is, suppose this bitterness happens. Is it the fault of the world, or is it your own responsibility that should have never happened? How can it be of the world? The world's not busy tuning in, eavesdropping, your brain. Okay, they feel dissatisfied. Let's walk up and, do something. See, the thing is, doesn't it require you to pause once in a while and just have a checkup and say, I've been giving. Let me give to myself a little bit. Let me just go take a holiday, take a break, and I'll return when I'm re-energized. Wouldn't that be a better approach? Because I've seen what happens. People give. They never give to themselves. And then they burn out and a whole different personality comes out, where all you could have done was regularly, every once in a while, ask yourself, what do I want? Do I want to maybe knit? Do I want to go out and do some kayaking? Do I want to go and cut trees? What do I want to do? Get in touch with that once in a while and take care of yourself. And then one can return back and continue giving. That way you never kind of go through this burnout. So most essential is, how are you doing? That's also part of the equation. Sharmili.
Back to your point that you said, people just think I have to do this, I have to do that. They kind of feel compelled, How if you're not a wise person, I guess, maybe that person thinks that that's their dharma. Like, how do you know the difference between dharma? Seems like very subjective. Like even Arjun was saying, I don't want to fight this war, and then Krishna's telling him, no, you need to fight it. It's your dharma to do it. But that could be taken the wrong way. Again, like if you're psychologically disturbed, like if it's a king, like you said, who's off and they just want to fight a war, but they could think that's their dharma. You know what I mean? I'm a little confused on the concept of when it's like you're doing something because you're attached to the results versus like, you're saying you're not attached to the results, you're thinking it's your dharma. Like, how do you know the difference? Like if you're not enlightened yet.
Enlightenment doesn't fix that question. So that question is outside the moksha equation. That equation is really just life experience and having a discerning mind. Basically sadhana chatushtaya, in Tattva Bodh. So just basically recognizing what kind of feedback am I getting from the world? Is this what I really want to do? Not really. What else could I do? Just changing your responses slowly until you refine your own decision-making process. And that decision-making process takes some time. This is why life experience is crucial. And this is why, Krishna keeps on saying, hey, if you just go off to the retreat and feel safe there, Arjuna, the Himalaya feels a lot safer, I get it. Himalaya represents that place where I don't have to do anything, just rest, chill out. He says, come back to this field, Kurukshetra, the field of action, because there you will make mistakes. And every time you make a mistake, you really open two doors. One is blame. Oh, I made a mistake, it's your fault. Two is self-introspection. I made a mistake, this didn't go as planned. What could have I done differently? What will I do next time? So each time the person opens the second door, whenever a mistake gets made or some feedback that is unpleasant comes your way, each time that second door refines your future decision-making process. So there's no real secret ingredient here. It's just a matter of falling down, getting up, falling down, getting up, and having the courage to do that and having the responsibility to admit, yeah, it was my fault. I could have done something different, because I know the temptation to offload it to external situations. This is unhealthy. There's no growth in there. That's opening door number one, blame. Door number two is always there for us, which is when opened, you learn something about yourself, and thus next time you make a decision that's much better. For instance, as I said to you some months ago, when I was coming back home from the retreat, Viveka Chudamani, the airlines did not accept my ticket, and all you want to do is just go back, right? They had some problems there. So I basically waited 3 hours, you know, expecting them to fix. And they're like, no, 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 it's okay. So just 5 more minutes. So you times 5 more minutes by 3 hours, and you imagine how many times they went on. And I was in a place of just sitting down, you know, helpless, couldn't do anything except wait. And a lot of thoughts were going through my mind. And I was thinking, okay, so I have a choice now. I can either curse them, you know, shout, tell them to hurry up. There's a million options. I said, let me just bring in the knowledge. What's the right way to act right now? Okay, just wait it out, breathe deeply, and recognize this is just within the, you know, cause-effect order. So this is the option I chose. Now, once in a while, the mind slipped. It went into what a bunch of, you know, baboons. But then I brought it back into this is Ishvara's order. So this is the reality. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say it all went perfect. So this went on, this process in the mind. Finally, after 3 hours, they gave me a piece of paper and they said, okay, we fixed it. I take this back to the check-in and they say there's still a problem. And they want to take me back to that same place for another 3 hours. And I said, okay, this is enough. No more. I'm just going to buy a new ticket. Now, I sat down and I introspected everything that I thought in this entire scenario. And I said, okay, now has it taught me to remain composed, that I could have not done anything, that I went through this whole mental scene. Just that process alone, I didn't even ask what will I do next time. Just that process alone of introspecting in one's experience has brought new strength, new resilience in other areas of life, including next time at the airport or whatever it is. So what I want to say is life experience, especially unpleasant situations, is your ticket to making more refined decisions. There's no other way. It's easy to stay home, and that's also a possibility, but ultimately, in terms of others, it's their dharma and so on. I cannot speak for others. I can only speak for yourself. How do you refine your own decision-making process? That's all that matters. Having spoken, the right and the non-right way to apply an action, is the solution to not do an action then? No, we're very clear on this. Then what is the solution according to the verse? It is to turn or convert your binding actions, actions that narrow my scope of possibility, that create that stubbornness in the future, that narrow my vision. From that, convert that into what's called healthy actions or non-binding actions. And you say, how do I do this? Because does that mean I'm supposed to eliminate them? No, I'm not. I didn't say eliminate. I just said convert binding into non-binding. And you say, well, the only way to do that is by eliminating, because by nature, a binding action, that means I have to win an argument every single time, is to simply stop doing that. But I say, no, it requires an attitudinal change. So now the next question that gets posed is, then how do you use what Krishna is going to call a yoga, a karma yoga? It is a yoga, it is a practice of applying an action with a certain attitude. How do you use karma yoga to have every action that you do build you up spiritually and mentally and intellectually and emotionally versus putting you down and making you more kind of narrowed vision and stubborn? So that's the question. Okay. What is the, I'm going to answer in a different way. What is the usual orientation that we all go by in this world in reference to objects, people, and situations? What thoughts do I have towards them, or any person has towards them? The object, person, or situation is a means to my happiness, isn't it? Okay, cool. This is a universal statement. So this means that a situation, object, or person is my savior. They will get me out of my rut, out of my, you know, whatever it is. And thus I attribute all power or most power to external situations. They are my ticket to happiness. Now, what karma yoga says is the first step. In fact, we don't even have to say karma yoga yet. The first step to maturity is acknowledging there is nothing right or wrong about objects, people, or situations. Tell me this. Suppose Mr. Smith says, this object, this person, or this country is just there, it's torturing me. Okay, so let's just take a rock, because a rock is part of the country that's torturing me. Where will I find in that rock an atom called Smith irritating atoms? Can you find like an intrinsic irritation atom that's there deliberately planted to give you a hard time? No. So again, the statement is the first step is to acknowledge an object that's surrounding you, whether it's a country, whether it's the environment, whether it is whatever it is, a person, whoever that person is, or a situation is intrinsically without value, without meaning. It has no meaning. The only meaning it has is the meaning that you give it, is the value that you give it. This is the huge first step to mental composure. That means there's no situation that intrinsically is there to make me happy, nor intrinsically designed to make me unhappy. It is rather just value neutral, just there. The person's there. What I impose or impute upon them, that very action is going to then give me a response, a certain emotion. So the first thing that we have to acknowledge, that is external situations or people or objects have no power to give me any kind of happiness or unhappiness. It just doesn't. So any happiness or unhappiness that you ever feel about anyone is really the kind of story you are telling yourself about that situation or person. Very important to understand this first. Okay. Now, what if you tell this to a beginner, that there is no value or meaning in objects or people? What if you tell this to a beginner? What's going to happen? Considering their whole life was invested in giving objects, people, and situations value of happiness and non-happiness. And you just say it has no meaning whatsoever. Are they going to be happy, cheerful, going to celebrate, go have a party? Because now even the party itself has no value, has no meaning at all, except the value that I give it. So you don't say this to a beginner. But what happens if you say this to someone with a relative composure, which, in my class, everyone is going to have, otherwise it wouldn't be here. You say this to someone with relative composure, relative maturity, and some kind of viveka in their life. What will happen then? You're going to connect. You're going to say, aha, so the meaning that I give is indeed my own attribution. Okay, so now what will this person do? They will start to suspect something very interesting. And you tell me if you're on the same page. They will start to say, I'm small, I'm insignificant, life is very tough, finding the solution is not easy, and I expect the world to save me, but the very world that I'm asking to save me is also feeling small, insignificant, and finding it tough to find a solution. And every promise that I've been given so far has failed. And whatever I do, it hasn't really solved this existential problem that I feel about my smallness, my insignificance, my non-lovingness, my ability to not be able to accept myself fully, despite them all saying, accept yourself. Just accept yourself. No, totally accept yourself. How can I ever accept someone whose self is intrinsically, or so I believe, small, insignificant, and incomplete? How can I ever accept that? It's not going to happen. Therefore, what happens? The person says, wait. So if action is not even a solution anymore, because who's acting? A dissatisfied I. Who wants a solution? A dissatisfied I. Who wants to gain one more spiritual hit of nonsense? A dissatisfied I. So if a dissatisfied I is a problem, is the center of all problems, then what has to be the solution then? Something other than the I, or this very I that's dissatisfied? It has to be the very I upon which all actions are supposed to satisfy. That means every single action was for the sake of pleasing a dissatisfied I. So what is the problem? A dissatisfied, insignificant I. So therefore, what's the next step? If the person has viveka, because they're not a beginner, then they say, thereby, what I have to do is turn to self-inquiry and discover the nature of this I. Because nothing else has worked. All promises have failed. Why have they failed? Because they were always talking about a solution other than the I. They were always adding something onto the I, or trying to sort of subtract something from the I, but most of them were just adding, but nothing has worked. So the person thus says, so I have to engage in the world to mature up and discover the full nature of this I. And whoever does this naturally, according to Krishna, is a karma yogi. Can you relate to this? Once upon a time, you've done everything. The dissatisfied I remained as is, and you just naturally turn to self-inquiry, to helping yourself through spiritual sadhana, through engaging in the world to develop more maturity. And it was all in the name of discovering your true nature. Can you relate to this? That was your motivation. If you did this, you were a natural karma yogi. So what is karma yoga? Karma yoga is simply recognizing it's a point of maturity where you say, for the first time in your life, you say, I didn't come here to get entangled with this and him and her and this, even though you will. But I didn't come here to get entangled. I came here to work out the truth, to find out who I am. Everything else is just incidental. And so you stay now, this is what I'm here for, to figure out the truth. And so Krishna says, this one is thus free from attachment. Okay? So now that you've come to realize that I'm not here to get entangled, you have a lot more space to say no and yes. And in that sense, you are free from this constant unhealthy attachment that every person and object is there to save me. No. The only one that's going to save you is you're going to save yourself through two methods. One, the scriptures, and two, through the guru. That's it. That's the only way to be saved. And Ishvara's grace, of course. You don't decide ultimately. So whenever it says here, free from attachment, we will soon read the verse and you'll see this. It says free from attachment. Okay. Whenever you hear the word attachment, please remember, to understand this, divided into two words. There's healthy attachment and unhealthy attachment. Otherwise, this constant, freedom from attachment, freedom from attachment. What kind of attachment? Freedom from healthy attachment? You're not going to be free from that. That's called freedom from eating, freedom from breathing, freedom from educating yourself. No, freedom from unhealthy attachment. What is the difference between healthy and unhealthy attachment? Healthy attachment is those things that are ultimately giving you that knowledge, giving you more space in life, helping you introspect to develop yourself. Unhealthy attachment is when I lean upon objects which I believe are contingent for my survival, for my well-being. That's unhealthy attachment. And consequently, continues the verse, he then says, as a result of the karma yogi finding his or her direction in life and clearing up his or her mind, they become a jnani. Their mind becomes self-knowledge friendly. They assimilate the knowledge, and that leads to a jnani, a wise person who is, verse, gata sangha, free from attachment. That means freedom from attachment to have to live a new life. Freedom from, oh, I want to come back. Freedom from, oh, I want to experience more lovemaking. Oh, I want to experience, another kind of, sensational relationship. Freedom from all of that. It's lovely while it's here, but I no longer have a need to have that one more time. Genuine freedom from that. Then they are mukta, liberated. Freedom from ignorance. That means freedom from the false notion of who I am. That means that notion has been erased because of your sincere studies. And yajnaya acharata, they perform for the sake of daily rituals. The word yajna here is, think of it as any ritual that you do to help yourself. Okay, that's a yajna. So any kind of opportunity is a yajna. Any kind of opportunity to help yourself is a yajna. Okay, someone likes to tell me who is a karma yogi so far based on what I said.
A karma yogi is one that does actions to limit their binding ragas and vaishas.
For the sake of moksha. Okay, always for the sake of moksha. The moksha has to be there for you, for that to be a karma yogi. Okay, good, thank you. Meenakshi?
Yeah. So karma yogi is someone who acts without very strong likes and dislikes.
Okay, I mean, they are going to start acting, of course, but they're going to, try to reduce them, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to try to reduce them through recognizing that my actions are ultimately there to develop me, mature me up, to gain life experience rather than to please me. So karma yogi, important, is the one who moves away from this is there to please me into this is there to help mature me, develop me, improve my thinking, improve my mentality, improve my composure, develop mindfulness for the sake of moksha.
Okay. Thank you.
Pankaj?
Karma yogi is a person who does something or all his actions because he knows that is his duty. And even if the results do not come as per his expectations, he is not adversely affected.
And what would make him or her not adversely affected? What kind of an attitude would you have to have?
You are equanimous to your results.
Okay, but why? But how did you develop that? Suppose I ask Pankaj, you're so equanimous towards results. Like, teach me, how did you arrive to that place? I really want to know. What would you say?
You don't have too much of ego. You believe that it is not I who's doing, it is somebody else who's doing it.
Okay, that's a good way. So in other words, it's the arms that are doing it. It's the brain that's choosing. It is, nature that is, right, acting through me. Okay, that's one way. Okay.
I'd say there's no real gain or loss.
Okay, there's
understanding there's no real gain and there's no real loss. It's just transactional. And the true self is none of those things.
Okay, good. And this is also important because sometimes this statement of gain or loss, it's transactional, can come off as a little bit cold for some people. So see, it's important. When it says here, freedom from attachment, what might happen is sometimes if you develop this attitude, people might call you or see you as sort of detached, like overly distant or cold in some situations. If this happens, then what's important is you need to reassure them once in a while. Look, this is just me in this time having this kind of coldness or distance or, right, detachment, but it's nothing about you. Otherwise, if you just sort of live this cold and detached state, which is really, how it tends to happen, then people sort of don't relate to you very well. So this is also
Karma yogi is the one, as you said, one who has naturally reached to a state of mind where he says, what I am here for, and start the self-inquiry. And then he or she appreciates the presence of Ishvara, the all intelligence, and dedicate all their actions to Ishvara, and consider Ishvara as the karmaphala data. Whatever comes is a prasad.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's really accurate to the point. So it is indeed a giving of nature, giving of many circumstances, and I'm now having that confront me, and I have to do the best of my ability to, navigate myself. Okay, Radhika?
So a karma yogi is one who was trying to stay in Ishvara Srishti and not go into Jiva Srishti. But how does he pull himself back again to go back to Ishvara Srishti is to surrender and to accept what is coming in front. But Ishvara Srishti is again Maya, right? So how do you go beyond that?
Excellent.
Thank you.
So I'm not going to answer that now. That will come in verse 24, but brilliant. That means less jiva srishti, less subjectivities, less personal biases, and more what is. Staying with what needs to be done in the way that is being called for versus what I think should be done. And this is the whole part of maturity. So of course, someone going to ask, how do you discern that? We will discuss this next week. And Vijay?
So I have one more question.
Okay, Radhika?
So then why should I not, because Jiva Srishti is inside Ishvara Srishti, so it is again, we can consider that itself as Ishvara Srishti. But I think this is the answer, like if you're inside Jiva Srishti, then that's where your karma is again and again, you're generating prarabdha and, you're not getting out of the cycle. So that's why it's important to not be inside Jiva Srishti and to be in Ishvara Srishti.
Simple answer is, suppose I, like a watch. What does a watch do? Tells the time, right? That is Ishvara Srishti. But suppose I have a watch, and for me, it is status, it is attracting, it is about showing off. That is called Jiva Srishti. That means I've imposed a value that belongs to me, and I put it onto the watch. And now the watch isn't just there to tell the time, it is there to help with my self-esteem, to show off, to show people how rich I am and so on. So this has to be reduced. Otherwise, if I surround myself with a bunch of ideas, what the world means, then when the teacher speaks about Ishvara Srishti, you're simply not going to connect. You're going to say, yeah, whatever, I really need, I like my life. I like my life, which is so well designed, so beautifully made, that this world, this ordinary world, I'm not interested. So, but the point is, you need to be interested in order to arrive to the final truth. Because the truth doesn't dwell in my personal fancies, it dwells in this world. I have to analyze the world in order to get to Brahman, which is in the next verse. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.